Amina had never imagined that her life would change so suddenly. Only a few months earlier, she had been living in a small, rented apartment in the city, managing her work, paying her bills, and carrying herself with the quiet pride of someone who believed she could handle anything. She was not rich, but she lived with dignity. She did not depend on anyone, and she liked it that way. Her independence was her identity. But life has its own ways of testing people. And it tested her in ways she never expected. First, the company she worked for shut down without warning. Then came the unpaid rent, followed by notices from the landlord. Amina tried to stay calm at first, believing she would find a new job quickly. But weeks passed, and her savings kept shrinking. She sold small things, her extra clothes, her old phone, a few books just to manage basic food. Slowly, she realized she was fighting a battle she wasn't winning. One morning, after a long and tense conversation, the landlord finally asked her to leave. He wasn't harsh, but he was firm. Amina stood there quietly, her heart sinking, her pride hurting. Yet she had no strength left to argue. She packed her single suitcase, stepped out of the building, and walked away without looking back. She didn't want anyone to see the tears gathering in her eyes. She thought she would go to a friend, but as soon as she took out her phone, she realized she didn't want pity. She didn't want to appear weak. She didn't want anyone to see her at her lowest, so she kept walking. She walked until the tall buildings disappeared, until the city noise softened, until her mind felt numb from exhaustion. She rode a bus without thinking much, choosing the farthest stop because she wanted silence, just silence. By the time she got off, she found herself in a rural area where the air was fresh and open fields stretched far into the distance. The sky looked wider here, somehow more honest. Amina breathed deeply for the first time in days, but her heart still felt heavy. She walked along a dusty road, pulling her small bag behind her. The sun was already dipping low, leaving a soft golden color over the fields. She had no plan. She simply kept moving, hoping she would find a safe corner to rest for a while. After some time, she noticed a ranch in the distance. The wooden fences, the barn, and the small house looked simple but peaceful. Smoke rose gently from the chimney. She hesitated, stopping for a moment. She had never asked a stranger for help like this. Her pride whispered that she should keep walking, that she would figure something out. But her body was tired, her feet hurt, and her eyes felt heavy. She hadn't slept properly in days. Finally, something inside her quietly said, "You can't do everything alone." Taking a deep breath, she walked toward the ranch. The gravel crunched under her shoes as she made her way up the pathway. She felt nervous and unsure, almost embarrassed for coming. She wondered who lived here. A family? An old couple? Someone kind? Someone cautious? She wiped her hands on her clothes, trying to calm herself. She reached the front door and knocked softly. When no one responded, she knocked again, a little louder. This time, she heard footsteps from inside. The door opened, and standing there was a man she had never seen before. He was tall, with strong shoulders and sun-tanned skin, the kind that showed he worked outside every day. His hair was messy and dark, and a faint scar ran across his eyebrow, giving him a rugged, serious look. His eyes were calm but observant, as if he could read her situation without her saying a word. This was Hassan. For a moment, both of them simply looked at each other. Amina felt small, tired, and completely out of place. She swallowed hard, feeling her pride push against her chest, but she forced herself to speak. "I'm sorry to disturb you," she said quietly. I just need a place to stay for a short time. Just a night or two. I have nowhere else to go." Her voice trembled slightly, and she looked away, embarrassed. She expected him to dismiss her or ask too many questions. Instead, he stood there silently, studying her with a calm expression. He didn't look angry or suspicious, just thoughtful, as if he was trying to understand her story without her saying anything else. "You're traveling alone?" he finally asked, his voice deep but gentle. "Yes," she replied. "Do you have family nearby?" She shook her head. Hassan glanced at her small suitcase, then back at her tired face. He could see she wasn't lying or trying to make trouble. She looked like someone who had been holding herself together for too long. He didn't know what her story was, but he could sense she needed kindness more than anything else. "All right," he said after a moment. "You can stay, but only in the guest room." Amina blinked, surprised. She hadn't expected him to agree so quickly. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was soft, almost breaking with relief. He nodded and stepped aside to let her enter. The house smelled faintly of wood and warm food. It felt unexpectedly comforting after the cold wind outside. Amina stepped inside slowly, still unsure if she was doing the right thing, but grateful for the shelter. Hassan led her to a small, neat room at the end of a short hallway. The room had a single bed, a wooden chair, and a little window facing the fields. It wasn't fancy, but it felt safe, and at that moment, safety was all she needed. "You can stay here," he said. "There are some blankets in the cupboard, and the bathroom is across the hall." She nodded, trying not to look too emotional. "I'll leave tomorrow morning," she said quickly, wanting to show she wasn't planning to take advantage of his kindness. "Rest first," he replied simply. "We'll talk in the morning." Then he stepped away and returned to the living area, giving her space. Amina sat on the bed, feeling its softness beneath her. She hadn't rested on a real bed in days. Everything inside her felt heavy, her legs, her arms, her heart. She looked around the room, taking in the quiet, the stillness, the feeling of being indoors again. As she lay down, she thought about how much her pride had cost her. For so long, she had refused to ask anyone for help. She had tried to fight alone, believing she could survive without leaning on anyone. But now, sitting in a stranger's guest room, she realized something important. Sometimes, asking for help wasn't weakness. Sometimes, it was the only way forward. The wind outside grew softer as evening settled in. The ranch was calm, peaceful, almost comforting. Amina closed her eyes, telling herself she would leave soon. She didn't want to be a burden. She didn't want anyone to think she was helpless. She had come here only because she had no choice. But deep inside, she felt a quiet voice telling her that maybe this place meant something. Maybe this unexpected stop on her journey had a purpose. Maybe she was meant to be here not forever, but long enough to find herself again. In the living room, Hassan sat near the window, looking out at the darkening fields. He didn't know who she was or what had brought her to his door, but something about her felt honest. Something about the tired look in her eyes had touched him. He didn't ask her questions because he understood that sometimes people needed time before they shared their story. For now, he was simply giving her a safe place to rest, just as someone had once done for him when he needed it. Amina drifted into sleep slowly, with a mix of exhaustion and relief. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know if she would find a job, a new direction, or even the strength to start over. But for the first time in weeks, she wasn't afraid of the night. She had shelter, she had a bed, and she had a stranger who had opened his door without judgment. She didn't know it yet, but this simple act of kindness was about to change everything in her life. The next morning, Amina woke up slowly, feeling a kind of peace she had not felt in a long time. For a moment, she didn't even remember where she was. The room was quiet, sunlight glowing softly through the window, and the sound of birds outside filled the still air. Then everything came back to her: the long walk, the ranch, the stranger who opened his door. She sat up and rubbed her eyes. Her body was still tired, but she felt a little stronger, as if sleep had washed away a part of her worry. She looked at her small bag in the corner and reminded herself that she shouldn't stay long. She didn't want to depend on anyone. She had already taken enough help. Slowly, she got up and stepped out of the room. The house smelled of warm bread and something freshly cooked. She walked toward the living area and found Hassan in the kitchen, standing near the stove with a simple breakfast on the table. He looked up when he heard her footsteps. "You're awake," he said in his steady, calm voice. "Yes," she replied softly. "Thank you." for letting me stay." He nodded. "Sit. Eat something." She hesitated for a moment, but hunger was already pulling her toward the table. She sat down and looked at the simple meal: eggs, bread, and tea. It wasn't anything fancy, but to someone who had eaten very little over the last few days, it looked comforting. "You didn't have to prepare this," she said, trying not to sound overwhelmed. "It's just breakfast," he replied, pouring tea into her cup. "Everybody eats." There was no pressure in his voice, no questions about her past, no pity. It made her feel strangely safe. They ate quietly. Amina kept her eyes on her plate, unsure of what to say. Hassan wasn't talkative either, but his silence wasn't uncomfortable. He seemed like the kind of person who spoke only when necessary. After breakfast, she stood up. "I should leave today," she said, trying to sound confident. "I don't want to trouble you." "You're not troubling anyone," he replied calmly. "But if you want to stay another day, you can. At least until you figure out where you're going." His words surprised her again. She expected him to agree right away when she said she'd leave. Instead, he was offering her more time. "I don't want to be a burden," she said quietly. He looked at her for a moment. Everyone needs help sometimes. Amina didn't know why, but his words hit her deeply. She nodded slowly, not fully committing but also not insisting on leaving. She needed time to think, time to breathe, time to gather herself. After breakfast, Hassan went outside to take care of the ranch animals. Amina watched him from the doorway as he walked toward the stable. He moved with the steady confidence of someone who understood his work well. The ranch looked peaceful: wide fields, horses grazing calmly, wooden fences stretching out in neat lines. It was a different world from the noisy city she had left behind. She stood there for a while, unsure what to do. She didn't want to sit inside like a guest who expected service, nor did she want to follow him around without being asked. After thinking for a moment, she decided to help in the small ways she could. She began by cleaning the kitchen, washing the dishes, wiping the counters, sweeping the floor. The tasks were simple, and they helped her feel less helpless. When she finished, she stepped outside again. Hassan was carrying hay to the horses when he saw her walking toward him. "You don't have to work," he said. "I know," she replied softly. "But I want to. I can't just sit and do nothing." He studied her for a moment, then pointed toward a smaller shed. "There are some tools there. If you want, you can help by cleaning the small feeding bowls." She nodded, grateful that he didn't treat her like someone fragile. She went to the shed, found the bowls, and began washing them with water from the pump. The work wasn't difficult, but it felt grounding. It reminded her she could still contribute, still be useful. As the day went on, they worked in a quiet rhythm. Hassan fed the animals while she cleaned, organized, and helped wherever she could. The sun was warm, the air fresh, and for the first time in many days, Amina didn't feel lost. She felt present. Later, as they both walked back to the house, Hassan spoke first. "You work hard," he said. Amina smiled faintly. "I'm used to it." "You don't need to prove anything here," he added. "Just be yourself." She wasn't sure how to respond to that, so she simply nodded, keeping the small warmth of his words inside her heart. In the evening, after they finished dinner, they sat in the living room. Hassan wasn't talkative, but he wasn't unfriendly either. He read something on his old tablet while Amina looked around the cozy room. Everything in the house felt simple and handmade. There were wooden shelves, a small lamp beside the couch, and pictures of horses on the walls. "This ranch is nice," she said quietly. "It's peaceful," he agreed. "How long have you lived here?" she asked. "Since I was a boy," he replied. "My father built most of this place. After he passed, I took over." Amina didn't ask more. She sensed that the topic carried memories he didn't want to open yet. She sipped warm water in silence, feeling a strange comfort she couldn't fully explain. She had only been here for one day, yet the ranch felt less frightening than the world outside. The quiet made her feel like she could breathe again. That night, as she returned to the guest room, she looked around with gratitude. She didn't know why Hassan had agreed to let her stay, but she didn't take it lightly. She knew people rarely help strangers without expecting something in return. But Hassan hadn't asked for anything, not even a single question about her past. She lay down, thinking about the city she had left, the people she hadn't called, the pride she had swallowed to ask for help. She wondered what tomorrow would bring. Would she stay another day? Would she search for work nearby? Would she keep wandering? She didn't have the answers yet, but she felt stronger than she had yesterday. The next morning, she woke up early without needing anyone to call her. She went to the kitchen and started preparing tea and bread. When Hassan walked in, he looked slightly surprised but not upset. "You don't need to do that," he said softly. "I want to," she replied. "It makes me feel normal." He nodded, accepting her simple explanation. They ate together quietly again, a rhythm slowly forming between them. Two strangers sharing a table, yet somehow feeling less like strangers each passing hour. After breakfast, they walked out to the ranch fields. Hassan handed her a pair of gloves. "If you want to help today," he said, "you can come with me to the barn, but only if you're comfortable." She nodded, holding the gloves with a small smile. As the day unfolded, they worked side by side. Amina learned how to brush the horses, how to clean their small feeding areas, and how to check the water levels. Hassan guided her with patience, never raising his voice or making her feel foolish when she didn't know something. There were moments when their eyes met, brief and gentle, but neither of them spoke about the quiet connection forming between them. It wasn't anything romantic yet, just trust, just understanding, just two people trying to find their place in life. In the evening, Amina felt tired but satisfied. She sat under a tree outside the house, watching the sunset paint the sky in soft orange and pink waves. Hassan walked over and stood near her. "You did good today," he said simply. "Thank you for letting me help," she replied. "You helped a lot." They stood quietly for a while, watching the horses walk slowly across the field. Amina felt something she hadn't felt in months: belonging. It wasn't strong or sudden, but it was there, growing gently inside her. She looked at the ranch, the fields, the peaceful sky, and then at Hassan, who stood calmly beside her. She didn't know how long she would stay. She didn't know what the future held, but she felt safe here. Safe enough to breathe, safe enough to heal a little, and she felt grateful not only for the shelter he gave her, but also for the silent respect and kindness that came with it. That kindness had begun to melt the walls she had built around her heart. She didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of a connection that would change her life in ways she had never imagined. Amina had now been at the ranch for several days. What was meant to be a temporary stay slowly began to feel like a place where she could breathe again. The fear that had followed her for weeks started fading, replaced by a calm rhythm that the ranch naturally offered. Every morning, she woke to the soft sounds of animals, the gentle wind brushing through the fields, and the warm light that filled the sky. She didn't know how long she would stay, but she knew one thing. Clearly, her heart felt lighter here. Hassan continued his work as usual, but Amina noticed small changes in him. He seemed less quiet around her now. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his voice carried warmth instead of the distant tone he used on the first day. Sometimes, she caught him watching her with a thoughtful look, as if he was trying to understand her without asking anything. One afternoon, as she helped him brush one of the calmer horses, she finally asked a question that had been sitting in her mind. "You live here alone?" she asked softly. Hassan nodded. "Mostly." She glanced at him, waiting for him to continue, but he didn't. He kept brushing the horse gently, his expression unreadable. "Do you ever feel lonely?" she tried again. He paused for a brief moment. "Sometimes," he said, "but the animals keep me busy. And it's peaceful here." His answer was simple, but Amina felt there was more behind it. A silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, but heavy with unspoken thoughts. Later that day, one of the ranch workers, an older man named Raymond, came to the barn to check some supplies. He greeted Amina with a warm smile and spoke kindly to her. She liked talking to him because he reminded her of someone who had seen many seasons of life, and understood people without judging them. After exchanging a few friendly words, Rahman looked toward Hassan, who was working outside. "You know," he said quietly to Amina. Hassan wasn't always this silent. Amina turned to him, curious but hesitant. She didn't want to pry into someone's personal story, especially someone who had helped her so much. Raymond noticed her hesitation and smiled. "Don't worry. I'm not gossiping. But sometimes it helps to know why a person is the way he is." Amina nodded slowly, giving him permission to continue. "Hassan was very close to his father," Rahman explained gently. "Everything he knows about this place, this ranch, the horses he learned from him." Amina listened quietly, her heart softening. "Some years ago," Raymond continued, "there was an accident. A storm came suddenly. Hassan and his father were trying to bring the horses inside. Something fell. The details aren't important, but his father didn't survive." Amina felt her breath catch. She looked toward Hassan with new understanding. "He got that scar around the same time?" she asked softly. Raymond nodded. "Yes, he was hurt too. But the scar on his face wasn't the only one he carried. After that, he changed. He became quieter, more distant. He stopped going into town unless it was necessary. He works hard, maybe too hard, but he carries everything inside." Amina felt a heaviness settle in her chest, a mixture of sadness for Hassan and respect for the strength he carried. "Does he have any family left?" she asked. "A cousin far away," Rahman replied. "But no one close. He's been alone here for a long time." Amina looked out toward the fields again, seeing Hassan walking with a steady pace. She imagined the pain he must have gone through, pain that stayed with him every day, silently shaping the person he had become. Raymond placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You being here, it's good for him. More than he shows." The words stayed with Amina long after the conversation ended. That evening, she found herself watching Hassan more closely, not with curiosity but with empathy. She noticed the small details, the way he touched the horses gently, the quiet sigh he sometimes let out when he thought no one was watching, the habit of looking toward the fields as if remembering someone who once stood beside him. She didn't ask him about his past. She didn't mention Rahman's words. But she felt something shift inside her, a growing desire to understand him better, to be someone he could trust. Just as he had given her a place to feel safe, the days continued in quiet harmony. They worked together, shared simple meals, and sometimes talked about small things. The weather, the animals, the land. One afternoon, while repairing a broken fence, Hassan suddenly said, "You seem better these days." Amina looked up, surprised by his comment. "Better?" "Yes," he said, carefully adjusting the wooden plank. "When you first came, you looked tired. Like you were carrying something heavy." She smiled gently. "I was. And now?" he asked. She paused, thinking honestly. "Now, I feel lighter." "This place helped." Hassan nodded. "Good." His simple word carried more meaning than long sentences could. Later that evening, Amina sat under the big tree near the house. The sunset was soft, painting the sky in warm colors. She hugged her knees, enjoying the peaceful moment. A few minutes later, she heard footsteps approaching. "Mind if I sit?" Hassan asked. "Of course," she replied with a smile. He sat beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. They both watched the sky, their silence comfortable. "You know," Amina said softly, "I didn't think I'd ever feel peaceful again." Hassan turned to her slowly. "What happened?" She took a slow breath. This was the first time he had asked her directly. Maybe he felt she was ready to share. "I lost my job," she began. "Everything fell apart after that. I tried to manage, tried to stay strong, but it was too much. I didn't have anyone I could depend on, and I didn't want to ask for help. My pride kept me from saying I was struggling." Hassan listened without interrupting. "When the landlord asked me to leave, I knew I couldn't pretend anymore. I was scared, more than I've ever been. Coming here, knocking on your door, it felt like the hardest thing I've ever done." Her voice trembled slightly, but she continued. But you didn't ask questions. You didn't judge me. You just gave me a place to breathe. Hassan looked away, his eyes thoughtful. Everyone needs a place to breathe, he said softly. I've been there too. Their eyes met, and something quiet but powerful passed between them, understanding, empathy, a shared softness, only people with deep wounds recognized in each other. Over the next few days, Amina began to encourage Hassan in small ways. When he stayed quiet for too long, she asked gentle questions. When he joked lightly, a rare thing, she laughed with warmth, making him smile more often. When he looked distant, she simply stayed near him, offering silent company. Hassan, in return, noticed the little things she did. He appreciated how she helped without being asked, how she treated the animals with kindness, how her presence brought a sense of calm to the ranch. He didn't say much, but Amina sensed it in the way he looked at her with gratitude. Their bond grew quietly, not through grand moments, but through everyday kindness, shared silence, and small conversations that slowly opened their hearts. One evening, rain began to fall softly. Amina stood near the porch, watching the sky shimmer with tiny droplets. Hassan joined her, leaning against the wooden railing. It's peaceful, she said. Yes, he agreed. Rain always feels like a new beginning. A new beginning, she repeated softly, liking the way the words felt. They stood side by side, close enough to feel each other's presence, far enough to respect each other's space. Amina felt a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time, a warmth that came not from romance but from understanding. From the gentle comfort of two wounded souls, slowly healing together. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing clearly. She didn't feel alone anymore. And neither did he. Something unspoken had begun between them, something soft, fragile, and beautiful. Something that neither of them dared to name yet, but both of them felt in their hearts, and without even realizing it, they were already changing each other's lives in ways they never imagined. Days turned into weeks, and Amina's life at the ranch began to feel strangely natural. She still reminded herself that she was only staying temporarily, but the ranch had slowly become a place where her heart felt steady again. The wide fields, the quiet mornings, the simple routines, all of it wrapped around her like a soft blanket she didn't know she needed. Hassan had also changed in small but clear ways. He smiled more now. His voice had become warmer. He no longer avoided conversations, and sometimes he even started them himself. Amina could see that the heaviness in his eyes had softened, like a window finally clearing after a long winter. Still, neither of them openly spoke about the invisible bond forming between them. They moved gently, slowly, giving each other space to grow, to heal, to trust. It was a connection built not on big declarations but on small kindnesses, shared meals, quiet talks, peaceful evenings. But life has a way of testing even the quietest moments, and one early morning brought a challenge neither of them expected. Amina woke up to the sound of distant thunder. The sky outside her window looked strange, dark, and heavy, as if a storm had arrived earlier than the season usually allowed. She stepped out of her room to find Hassan already at the door, staring out at the fields with concern. Is everything okay? Amina asked softly. A strong storm is coming, he said, stronger than usual. She followed his gaze and saw the horses in the distance looking restless. The wind was picking up quickly, making the trees sway in large movements. Will they be safe? She asked. They will be if we move fast, he said. His calm voice carried a hint of urgency. I need to bring them into the barn before the storm gets worse. I'll help, she replied without hesitation. He looked at her for a moment, then nodded. There was trust in his eyes, trust that she wouldn't panic, trust that she would stay by his side. They rushed toward the fields as the wind became stronger. The sky growled with deep rumbles, and the first drops of rain began to fall. Hassan moved toward the horses with steady confidence, speaking to them softly to keep them calm. Amina followed his lead, helping guide them toward the barn. One of the younger horses was nervous and kept pulling away. Amina approached slowly, speaking in a gentle voice the way she had seen Hassan do. The horse calmed slightly, and together they guided it into the safety of the barn. By the time the last horse was inside, the storm had fully arrived. Rain poured down heavily, the wind howled, and the trees bent low under the pressure. Hassan closed the barn doors firmly, checking every lock and latch. Amina wiped the rain from her face. "Are we done?" "Almost," he said. "We need to secure the tools and check the storage shed." They worked together, fighting the wind as they ran from one spot to another. The storm was loud, but Amina didn't feel afraid, not with Hassan nearby. His presence made her feel safe, even in the middle of chaos. When everything was finally secured, they rushed back to the house, soaked from head to toe. As soon as they stepped inside, Amina let out a breath she didn't even realize she had been holding. "That was intense," she said, trying to smile. Hassan nodded, his hair messy and wet. "You did well." His words warmed her, like they always did. They changed into dry clothes and sat by the small heater in the living room. The storm continued outside, shaking the windows and filling the air with its roar. But inside the house, the warmth slowly returned. Amina watched the flames flicker inside the heater. The quiet between them felt different, full of unspoken feelings brought to the surface by the chaos they had just faced together. "Thank you," Hassan said suddenly. Amina looked at him, surprised. "For what?" "For helping. For staying calm. For being here." Her heart softened at his words. "I couldn't just stand inside while you did everything alone." He nodded, staring at the heater. "I used to do everything alone," he said softly. "For a long time." Amina listened quietly, sensing that he was opening a door to a part of himself he usually kept closed. "This ranch. It's all I have," he continued. "After my father passed, I felt like the world became too loud. I didn't know how to let anyone in, so I stopped trying." Amina felt a gentle ache in her chest. She understood him more than he knew. "Hassan," she said softly, "you don't have to do everything alone anymore." He looked at her, then really looked at her. His eyes held a mixture of emotion, gratitude, and something deeper that made Amina's breath slow. "You don't know how much your presence changed this place," he said. "It was quiet before, but not peaceful. Now, it feels alive again." Amina felt warmth spread through her chest. "And you don't know how much this place changed me," she replied. "I came here broken, scared, unsure of everything. But being here, being with you, it gave me strength again." The storm outside continued to rage, but inside, something softer and more powerful was unfolding. Hassan shifted slightly closer, not too close, but close enough that Amina could feel the warmth of him. His voice lowered, steady and honest. "I didn't expect to care this much," he admitted. "Not after everything." Amina's heart fluttered. "I didn't expect it either," she whispered. They sat in silence for a long moment, listening to the rain. The room felt warm, calm, full of something tender. Slowly, Hassan reached out, not to take her hand, not to rush anything, but just to rest his fingers lightly near hers. A small gesture, but full of meaning. Amina didn't pull away. She let her fingers touch his gently, accepting the quiet connection between them. When the storm finally began to calm, the heaviness that once filled their hearts had lifted, replaced by something new, something fragile and beautiful. Later that evening, after the rain softened to a gentle drizzle, Hassan walked Amina to the porch. The air smelled fresh, washed clean by the storm. "Everything survived," he said, looking at the fields. "Because we worked together," she replied. He turned to her, his expression soft. "I'm glad you knocked on my door that day." Amina felt her eyes warm with emotion. "I'm glad you opened it." There was no need for dramatic words. No need for confessions or promises. What they shared was deeper than that. Something grown, slowly, honestly, gently. Over the next few days, their connection continued to strengthen. They laughed more. They talked more. They shared small moments that made their bond feel natural and real. Amina found herself looking forward to the mornings, knowing she would see Hassan at the breakfast table. Hassan found comfort in hearing Amina's footsteps around the house, her soft presence filling spaces that had once felt too empty. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in soft tones, Hassan walked beside Amina along the fence line. The horses grazed peacefully, and the air was warm. "Amina," he said, his voice steady but gentle, "I don't know what your future plans are. I won't stop you from going if that's what you want. But if you choose to stay, I would be grateful." Amina felt her heart swell. She looked at the fields, at the home she never expected, and then at the man who had quietly healed her without even trying. "I don't want to leave," she said softly. "Not anymore." Hassan's eyes warmed with relief, and something deeper, something like love, quiet but strong. They stood there together as the sun set completely, the world around them calm and beautiful. Amina had found shelter here, but more than that, she had found peace, belonging, and a love she never imagined would be hers. And Hassan, once alone and guarded, had found someone who brought light back to his life. Two souls, scarred in different ways, had found each other not by chance, but by need, by timing, by fate. And together, they finally stepped into a future filled with hope, comfort, and gentle love.